Good morning.
All right. So good morning, everyone. I'm going to intro for you, Lisa. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our, what is this? I think it's the 6th session, I want to say, of our series, mental health webinar series for Mental Health Awareness Month, which is this month of May. My name is Carrie Ann Peart, and I am the advisor for the Health, Human Services, and Education portfolio for the County Executive's Office here in Prince George's County. So it's a mouthful. So I have a swath of things that I cover under my portfolio, and one of those many things that is dear to my heart is that of emotional and mental wellness for our community members. So today I'm joined by two facilitators that we're so excited to welcome on board. Ms. Lisa Larrabee, who is the clinical director for the DC services of Arundel Counseling, and she's also the clinical manager of specialized interventions at the Maryland Family Resource Incorporated. We also have with us Rebecca Mitch McGee, who is Dr. McGee by that name actually, who is currently the president and executive director of Arundel Counseling. They are here with us today, and they're going to be working with us in presenting some information for our first responders. This is the emotional self-care for first responders session, and we really wanted to make sure we took some time out to honor the first responders that have been diligently serving on the front lines throughout this response and really stepping up for our community members. And we wanted to take this time to honor them and to give them some tools, hopefully allow them to support themselves as we continue through the pandemic. So,
Carrie Ann,
yes.
we have to, Lisa, you're with Maryland Family Resources, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right, and as opposed to Arundel with
pardon me.
Provider within Prince George's County, Maryland, Maryland Family Resources.
Thank you for that correction, Christine.
Oh, you're welcome. And good morning, everyone.
Good morning again. So welcome aboard, Lisa and Rebecca. Thank you so much for the time. I think I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to kick us off.
Sure. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. It looks like there's about 30 people here. We're very excited and honored to have you all with us. And we will do a temperature check to see who's in the room, but I wanted to just welcome you all and say, that we're really honored and thrilled to have this opportunity to support each and every one of you. And Rebecca, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Well, much like Lisa, we're very excited to be here. And also much like Carrie Ann, this is a cause that's very near and dear to us. And what a time to be presenting on emotional care, because we'll get into talking about crisis and trauma, but this is certainly an on-point topic, not only just for May as Mental Health Month, but also for what we're going through as a society, as a community, and as a whole world right now.
Great. So I got my degree in social work and not in IT, but I am going to pull up the slides. So bear with me just for 2 seconds. Looks like it's working.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm just going to put it into slideshow mode.
Awesome.
All right. It looks like it's just loading up. Thank you all for your patience. So our topic today is on emotional self-aid for first responders. Again, we're thrilled that you're all here with us. We know how busy first responders are, and so we're grateful that that you're joining us. We wanted to give a really big special thanks to Prince George's County Health and Human Services. They did a ton of work to organize this. And when the pandemic hit, they did a lot of hard work to go from an in-person training to a webinar, which is no easy task. And so we wanted to give a special thanks to them. In particular, Ms. Christina Wadler, who's the manager for the Prince George's County Behavioral Health Authority, and Carrie Ann Peart, who both of whom you just heard. And And again, she's the special advisor for the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Prince George's County Department of Health and Human Services. It was their vision that made this training possible. Where there's a lot of people, we did want to get a temperature check for who's in the room. If you're comfortable sharing in the chat box your name, your role, and one way you combat stress, and I'll read out a couple that come in. It's just because there's 30 people, which is fabulous. We may not be able to verbally go through every single person in the 2 hours that we set, but if you could go ahead and put in the chat box your name, if you're comfortable disclosing that, or your initials, your job. Are you with Adult Protective Services, Child Protective Services, Police Department, Fire Department, EMS, or concerned citizen, and one way you combat stress? The chat box is at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a phone, just poke your screen and it'll come up. If you're on a computer, it'll come up on the bottom right-hand side. I just put a message in, so you may see a little red dot.
Yeah, I see some coming in, so that's great.
Great. Now I'm starting to see them. We've got Kevin. We've got a therapist. Just because we're being recorded, I won't say your whole name, just in case you want to stay private. But we've got a therapist saying she combats stress. She likes socializing and laughing. I think that's fabulous. We've got someone named Kevin in the room. Deanna likes to go for walks and runs, which I think is fabulous. We're going to talk about fitness later in the training. We've got Autumn likes comedy, yoga, meditations, and baths. That's fabulous, that the mind-body connection and humor. We've got reading and shopping. Those are fun activities. Target seems to come to my house every day these days. We've got taking walks, calling sisters or close friends daily, reading a good or inspiring book. Thank you to Keisha. We've got Tanya, who likes to communicate with family and friends. It's great to have a positive support system. We've got Andrew, who likes gardening. That's great. We've got Andrea, who likes walking and listening to music. We've got Catherine, who likes baking, music, and gardening. We've got Lorenzo, who likes listening to music and taking walks. We've got Anna, who likes socializing and working out. That is so good. I need to work out more. All I do is eat anymore. And we've got Darlene, who likes gardening. And then Rebecca likes jigsaw puzzles. That's wonderful. I hope you don't lose pieces as easily as I do. Did anyone else want to chime in? Okay, we've got another. Kevin likes working out. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
If I see any more come in, I'll definitely acknowledge them. Yoga. That's wonderful. Yoga is a wonderful mind body soul kind of connection. So that's fabulous. Thank you all for your very helpful feedback. Playing basketball, that's always a good one. It can be good if you're good at it. If you're bad at it, it can be stressful. But no, anything athletic, getting out there, especially with other people, keeping the social distance. I think that's wonderful. I did want to say, I didn't want to call out where people work just in case they preferred to be private, but I just wanted to acknowledge that we have a wide variety of occupations represented. We've got a lot of people who are youth and family workers on the call. We've got a lot of people who work in different government roles, and we've got a lot of people from the other front lines, such as police and things like that. So we've got a really nice mix of people. And I did want to say that I wanted to kind of acknowledge that first responders right now is pretty broad. It's we sometimes think of first responders as like police, EMS, fire department, and that's true. But a lot of us mental health and administrative people, we're first responders too. We have to keep our doors open. We have to be attuned to the stress of the people who are coming to us. We have to be able to intervene, and the expectation is we keep rolling and we keep the doors open and the lights on, so to speak, and keep those services going. So I really appreciate you all being here and taking the time. We wanted to do a couple of housekeeping rules. Today's topic can raise a variety of, one more person chimed in that she likes going on bike rides, and Annabelle raised that, and then Ava said she likes to praise and worship, reading and read the Bible. We'll talk a lot, thank you for that, Miss Ava. We'll talk a lot about, how morality and a larger system of meaning can be helpful in terms of building resilience. Thank you all for your great contributions. Today's topic can raise a variety of feelings in terms of group guidelines to make this training fruitful but also safe for you. The topic can raise a variety of feelings. Some of them can be comfortable, some of them can be uncomfortable. You are to be commended for volunteering your time to learning more about this critical topic. So thank you to each one of you who took 2 hours out of your busy schedule. There will be opportunities for sharing, and we look forward to rich feedback and discussion. Please be mindful that the session is being recorded and may be available to others after the training. So just keep that in mind. We want to have a rich discussion, but, just be mindful, of your own personal boundaries around that. And please be open to sharing while also being sensitive to your own boundaries. If anyone has any other guidelines they'd like to put in, you can put it in the chat box, and we can add those in. And I'll go ahead to the next slide, but if any guidelines come in, I'll raise them. In terms of ethics, we always start our trainings with an ethics statement. The training was organized by the Prince George's County Department of Health and Human Services, but Rebecca and I take full responsibility for the content of the training. When we train, we may mention books or resources, and Arundel Counseling and Maryland Family Resource do not receive compensation for these endorsements. We will also mention resources at our clinic, the first responder resources at Anne Arundel Counseling and Maryland Family Resource for individuals who would like this support. These resources are available free of charge. In terms of the agenda, we're going to cover symptoms of trauma and crisis exposure, common personal qualities of first responders, cultural aspects of first responder organizations, risks of long-term exposure to crises and trauma, strategies for self-care, when professional supports are needed, and resources. Oops, sorry. In terms of elements of crisis and trauma, crisis generally refers to an active situation, while trauma generally refers to an event or series of events in the past. Crisis and trauma are typically sudden, unexpected, life-threatening, or life-altering events which can affect one's ability to cope and function. Immediate crises for first responders are particularly overwhelming without a lot of time to integrate before acting. If you're not speaking, if I could just ask everybody to mute, and when we have a discussion, we'll unmute you if that's okay. I just want to make sure I talk fast, and I just want to make sure people are able to hear me. So I'm wondering if people can go back to their chat box and talk about some common symptoms that happen when you have cumulative exposure. That means exposure over a long period of time. What are some symptoms when you have a lot of cumulative exposure to trauma and crisis? And if you could put that in the chat box. Feeling drained. Thank you, Akia. Low tolerance for new stress. Yes. People can be a lot more irritable, a lot more quick-tempered, just because their stress, their window of tolerance has been usurped. Anxiety. Yeah, a lot of free-floating anxiety or specific anxiety. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Absolutely. You can get a full diagnosis of PTSD. Neck and back aches, burnout, heart palpitations. That's true. There can be physiological responses. Thank you. Burnout. Thank you, Ms. Danielle and Ms. Autumn. Any others? Yeah, you've all hit on a lot of the physical and emotional responses. Some of them you already talked about, but again, the frustration, irritability, and anger, the sadness and depression. You can just get numbed out, like someone said, burned out. You can just be numb. You can start becoming really indifferent, like, it's okay that that's happening. Or you can just be numb, like you don't feel anything anymore. You can feel isolated. You can feel disconnected from others. Sometimes you'll be in the same room with someone, but you won't feel like you're connecting, or you might not even be able to connect to your spouse or to your family because you just feel really shut down. Your self-care may get worse. So you may have you might lose your hygiene. Your hygiene might get worse. You may not keep up with your fitness routine or your eating routine. You may just not care about yourself as much or take as good care of yourself. As someone mentioned, you may be tired, exhausted, and overwhelmed. You may have guilt. You may sort of disproportionately feel like you're a failure, or like you're just not doing a good enough job, or you just feel bad about yourself, or you wish you could do more. You may find yourself going to alcohol or other drugs to help. You may have problematic or risky behavior. So that means like you start doing behaviors that you didn't do before. So things that are more risky, like driving a car too fast, or doing things that you wouldn't have done like in a regular period. Anxiety or panic attacks, as somebody mentioned, excessive worries or fears, and those can be worries about specific things or just a general ongoing anxiety. You may be more easily startled. You may find that you're always on the lookout, like what's going to happen next, or you may just find that you feel, especially if you work with, dangerous populations, you may feel like you constantly have to be on guard. You may have bad memories come up unexpectedly, like, why am I thinking about this? It happened 10 years ago. You may have an increase in nightmares. A lot of people are talking about coronavirus nightmares right now. You may think about difficult things when you'd rather not. You may start taking on other people's traumas as your own. That's especially something I think that the people on those of you on the front lines experience a lot, is you start taking in, there's a psychological principle called projection. Like you start taking in other people's emotions and emotional needs, and you start taking them in as your own. That can be signs, some signals of that are that you're thinking about work after work, or you're preoccupied on a certain consumer or person that you interacted with. That's a sign that you're starting to pick up on their psychological makeup or components. Strong negative feelings, difficulty thinking clearly, poor concentration or disorganization, so you're losing things more easily. And then avoidance of things that remind you of the trauma. So that, for example, you were a police officer and you saw, or a protective worker, and you saw, a messy, like a kitchen that scared you in some way. You may start avoiding your own kitchen. And then a racing heartbeat. Someone mentioned earlier the physiological signs: racing heartbeat, increased headaches, stomach aches, things like that. Are there any other symptoms that people have noticed? I think people added a lot of good ones in. You can go ahead and call out.
Someone did put a note in the chat there about a dream that they were having.
Oh, okay. Let me pull that up. I'm sorry that I overlooked that. I'm trying to multitask. I've got it. Oh no. Someone put, I had a dream last night that I was out in public with no mask on. I don't mean to laugh. I think that's kind of cute, but yeah, it just shows, a lot of people have dreams about, thank you, Rebecca, for that heads up. A lot of people have dreams about things that have happened in the past, but now with all the chronic stress, and because it is going into the third month now, where most people have had to deal with the situation, or some of us have been dealing with it for 4 months, it's getting to be more of a current and a past thing. And so we do have this anxiety about making sure we have our masks on. We'll talk about protective equipment and the impact of that. And it is sort of a general anxiety, and it must have been scary to be out without one. Some people might be scared because of the disease risks. Some people might be scared because of getting in trouble, either at work or with the police department or with the store employees. Thank you for that, Akia. Autumn also pointed out that they can be impatient. She can be impatient, quick to anger, or not she, but people who are experiencing chronic trauma can be impatient, quick to anger. Back pain, I didn't think of that, but you can definitely start having knots in your back or back pain. Abnormal breathing, yes, people's breathing gets more shallow and more, it doesn't go all the way to the diaphragm, which is what you need to do to relax. Thank you for that, Autumn. That's great. You guys are all being so contributory. Thank you so much for that. And the risks of long-term exposure to crisis and trauma include oh, we've got one more. Oh, weight gain. Yes. A lot of people have been talking about the coronavirus, 15 pounds. It's normal in times of stress. I think it's almost physiological to have your eating habits affected. And food can be a way to cope. Also, people are busy, so they don't have time, especially if you're still working full time. You don't have time to necessarily, put together good meals. So you're getting a lot of takeout and just eating what you can when you can, and so it's harder to maintain, healthy eating habits. Also, we're not moving as much. We're just not, even basic things like I don't leave my apartment some days. And so I'm not going outside. I'm not going up and down stairs. I'm not, walking to work. I'm not walking to get my coffee, and so, I'm just moving less and eating more. So it's, weight gain is a definite side effect. Thank you. Thank you so much. The risks of long-term exposure to crisis and trauma include feelings of hopelessness and futility. Nothing I do even matters. Why do I bother anymore? Inability to experience emotions. And we'll talk a little bit about thoughts of suicide and self-harming behaviors. I think we all heard about the doctor in New York that unfortunately died by suicide as a direct result of being overwhelmed by the COVID-related conditions and the sense of hopelessness that she was understandably experiencing. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. You may start having negative views about yourself or negative views about others. You may find yourself more hostile to certain people, like either internally or externally, or you may feel bad about yourself. You may have an increase in aggressive behaviors, so verbal aggression. Some people even have more physically aggressive behaviors. We've heard, unfortunately, about the rise of domestic violence and child abuse in COVID conditions for a variety of reasons. You may have a sense of moral fatigue. Someone had mentioned earlier burnout, and a lot of that can be the moral injury. Like, I'm trying to do good. No matter what I do, things just keep happening. I'm not making a difference. And you see things that are morally uncomfortable too. Like, and I'm sorry, with all due respect to toilet paper hoarders, but, everyone kind of, when this first happened, everybody went into survival mode. And so everybody started really looking out for themselves. And I get that. You have to do what you have to do, but, it is different from our normal way of being where we do look out for each other and we do support each other. So sometimes you'll see things in the populations we serve or even in ourselves or our families where people start changing their morality because we're in very dangerous conditions, and that can lead to burnout too. Quitting work, people may, with long-term, they may decide to quit their work or leave their field altogether, or they may stay in their job but become ineffective. So just phoning it in or being there just to be there and collect a check, but you don't feel like what I'm doing isn't going to help anyway. So but I can't quit. So I'm just going to be here. And that's not a conscious choice. It's just that that's the best that they can do. And some people may have, like someone mentioned, weight gain. Someone might have substance abuse related problems, or they might start coping through other things, food, online gambling, sexual behaviors, things like that. So they, where we don't have our normal outlets, like going out to eat or things like that, or going to a movie, we start going to other coping skills, some of which are helpful and some of which, are not good long-term strategies. With respect to COVID-19, a lot of what we normally deal with is exacerbated. So we have an increase in social isolation. We just can't hug each other the way we used to, or even see each other. We can't be face to face with our friends. We can't have parties and things like that and gatherings. I know Easter and Passover were a month or so ago, and also Ramadan happened, and it's just really those are events where a lot of people in religious communities would come together, and we all had to isolate for those activities. People are working longer hours, so it's you're covering other people's shifts who may be out sick. You're working longer hours yourself. I find at my company that I have to do all the work I normally do, but then I also have to do all the COVID related work. So it's really hard to keep it like a 9-to-5 job. It's often going overtime, and we do want to do that to serve our consumers, but we also have to balance self-care. We may find that there's physical, forgive me, with COVID-19, there is a very real physical risk to ourselves. We could get sick ourselves. It is a fatal illness in a lot of cases. And we could also be a physical risk to our loved ones. So, there's a lot of people who are like, hey, I'm young, I'm healthy, I'm probably not going to die of it. But what about when they visit grandma? Or what about when they visit their mom, their sister who has a mother in a nursing home? So there's a lot of stress about not only being worried for yourself, but also being worried for those you come in contact with. Some people are, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Lisa, could you ask participants to raise their hand, and you would call on them that they could maybe share somehow that they have been, this pandemic has affected or impacted their crisis/trauma lives, if they're open to sharing?
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you for that, Rebecca. Would anybody mind either if they want to share out loud, there is a raise your hand function if you go into more on the bottom of your screen and then hit a raise hand. There's also a chat box if you prefer not to speak out loud on the recording. You can also put it in the chat box, and I'll scroll through and see if anyone's raising their hand. What Rebecca was asking is how COVID's affecting you, either with your work or with your personal life. I'm just putting the question in the chat box. Okay, I'm going to keep covering the slides, but I'll keep an eye on the chat box and the hand raising. Maybe some of the things are covered on the slide, but we're definitely open to other ways because you all are the ones experiencing it. Oh, we've got one. Thank you, Catherine. As we support families with disabilities, we worry that without respite care, those families are likely reaching mental health breaking points, and there's little we can do about that. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. So there's two levels to that. One is that we're being directly exposed to, not exposed, but we're being directly bearing witness to, families who already were stressed and now they have more stress. They can't get any kind of break because there's no respite available, or there's a lot of red tape around respite when it is available, because we don't want people spreading different households, COVID risk. But they're at their breaking point and they don't have an escape the way we normally do provide people with escapes. And that can make the children and adults with mental health or developmental disabilities vulnerable. And it can also make our families vulnerable. And it's hard to, we're used to being the yes people. We're used to being the solution finders. And now there aren't a lot of solutions. And so we've got to support them as best we can. But we're feeling more futile. Thank you so much, Ms. Catherine.
Could I raise a query that I know? This is Carrie Ann.
Yeah.
One of the discussions that we were having yesterday with some other colleagues in the county was that concern of childcare. So
Yes.
first responders have been actively engaged, as I said from the start, and in some of their communities, they have access to childcare, and in some spaces they don't. And so juggling that whole nuance of childcare in the time of COVID and what that may mean for family structure, positive family function, and then impact on career, for first responders too. So that's another major concern as I see this query about disabilities and respite care.
Yes, thank you so much, Carrie Ann. That's very important. You have, you're still being expected to go to work and you have to go to work, but you still have your children can't go to school. You try to find childcare. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have family close by, sometimes you don't. It is an extreme, it's stressor. And a lot of families, a lot of people, are being forced into the role of teacher too. And a lot of us aren't used to teaching, and we're not teachers for a reason. So there's a lot of different layers of stress with that. So thank you. Also, I did get another chat. Akia said she misses hugging her family and being able to visit her parents and grandparents. I think that's huge. And we got some affirmation of that from DM, from another person DM. Thank you, Akia. It is huge. Hugging is a way that, if you think about a baby, they need to be hugged all the time. Hugging is a very visceral human need that we have. And just touch, just a pat on the back or a shake of the hand. It's such a way that humans communicate, and it releases that oxytocin, and it releases, those good chemicals. And a lot of us, if we don't live with a partner or something like that, we have to go without it right now. Or if the partner's mad at us because we're irritable. And then Akia mentioned that she's also homeschooling 3 children as well as teleworking, and that's a new skill for a lot of us. Thank you for that, Akia. We have to balance, 3 children, 3 different logins, 3 different times for their meetings with their teachers. That's a full-time job in itself, just managing the schedule, and then, being expected to transition to telework, which a lot of us weren't doing before, and all the benefits and risks that come with that, and then balancing the new thing of telework with the new thing of being a teacher. It's not easy. Thank you for that. Thank you all. I'll keep my eye on the chat. Some people are also worried about their risk to colleagues. So some people don't know if they're exposed, and if they're exposing colleagues. Some people may have BL added in, that teleworking is not easy with homeschooling. Sometimes they never get a chance to breathe or think, because that's 2 full-time jobs. Teaching at home and working, that's already more than 2 full-time jobs, because parenting and teaching is more than a full-time job. And then you've got to add telework on top of that. It's not easy at all. Venus wrote in, have we given any consideration to having a mental health helpline for first responders? We are required to be at work and trying to deal with the stresses of keeping those we serve, our colleagues, ourselves, and our families safe with limited resources. Offering someone to professionally talk with may relieve stress. Thank you for that, Venus. We will talk about some resources at the end of the slides. Maryland Family is and Arundel Counseling, for example, does have a law enforcement support hour, which they've had for a while, and they're very well equipped to work with that. Maryland Family is also providing a first responder brief therapy. So we do an assessment and 3 therapy services, and it's all by telehealth. So you don't have to go anywhere. And so those resources are available. We also do provide some crisis numbers. So thank you for raising that. I think that's wonderful. And I think it's very needed. So thank you for that. Great contributions. Thank you, everybody. Go ahead.
Lisa, I recently read an article that I posted on my LinkedIn page, but it was indicating that the title of the article was that mental health professionals will be on the front lines for years after COVID-19. And it's really, I think, quite accurate in the sense that the mental health professionals will become first responders in sense of dealing with the crisis and the trauma that will exist and are prolonged. And the beginning of the article says, if you're a human and you've ever felt pain, ever felt fear, ever felt anything at all, you're someone a therapist goes to work for every day, and you're someone they believe wholeheartedly that change, hope, and health is a possibility for. So as we go through all the rest of the slides, we'll continue to say, reach out for help, get that support, get that therapist in line to help you create that change, create that hope, and that mind, body, spirit health that we all so desire and deserve in life.
Great. Thank you for that, Rebecca. That's a really great point. That's just really touching. So thank you. Thank you. Christina pointed out that the county also has a crisis hotline. So I will, when Rebecca's presenting, I'll see if I can pull that up really quick and put it in the chat box. Thank you, Christina, for pointing that out. Oh, Carrie Ann got it for us. Thank you. Prince George's County does have a crisis services hotline, 301-429-2185. Again, that's 301-429-2185. Thank you, Christina and Carrie Ann. That's very helpful.
I'll try to find the actual hotline. That's our, Carrie Ann gave the community crisis response system. A system that can only respond to crises. But in terms of, you're feeling a little down, that sort of thing, there's a hotline number, and I'll try to find it. It's run by Community Crisis Services, Inc., Tim Jansen's shop.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Christina.
That's the actual hotline for just, you don't have to be in crisis in order to, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So the crisis services is more for, aggression, suicidality, where you need someone to come out right away, or you need to figure out if you need to go to the hospital, and we'll provide a supplemental resource for for people who are not at that point but need someone to talk with. Thank you both, Christina and Rebecca and Carrie Ann. One thing that we noticed is that some people have negative associations with personal protective equipment. Someone had mentioned earlier having the nightmare about not having the mask on, or the bad dream about having no mask on. Some people, especially if they serve in the military or if they've served in the some sort of a crisis setting before, going to an earthquake zone or something like that, they may have bad memories associated with personal protective equipment. Also, personal protective equipment is a barrier between you and other people. And we talked about how important it is to, that need for intimacy, and just reading people's body language is so much harder when your mouth and your nose are covered. You can't see if people are smiling or grimacing. there's an increased risk of suicide. One thing that's important is that there's so much news coverage. Like normally what we do is kind of humble work, and we're not in the news a lot. And right now the news coverage is constantly bombarding us. Like the disease is getting worse. All these people are dying. You know, children are dying. Like there's just this constant bombardment of news, and bad news at that. And you know, it can be overwhelming because you're seeing it at work, and then you're seeing it on the websites, and you're seeing it on TV. And we also, because of COVID, we also have a lack of the normal supports that we rely on, such as people mentioned, hugging, handshakes, physical reassurance, recreation, and ways to blow off steam. So something as simple as, you know, meeting your friends for a happy hour, or going out to dinner, or going to a movie, or going shopping. We can't do those things in the same way right now, so we don't have a way to blow off steam. DM Johnson, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used your last name, but DM did provide the General Crisis Hotline, 301-864-7161. Again, that's 301-864-7161. Thank you for those resources and for that question.
Thank you, DM. And I'm thinking too that I recall, Tim Jensen, we went to that 211 system. And that's probably why I'm not recalling his.
Yes, there's a 201.
You know, because I used to know it on the top of my head. We went to that 211 system. So that's another way to get them. Yeah. Thank you, though.
Great. Thank you. And I did have a quote from, which was really like good. Thank you, Christine and Carrie and DM for that. A retired police sergeant says, your body only gets assaulted once in a while, but your brain gets assaulted every day. And that was a retired police sergeant. So the idea of your brain getting assaulted, I think, is very apt right now. We're just constantly bombarded with very difficult subject matter. So I wanted to do a little activity. If you do happen to have paper and a pen, or you know, if you have kids, maybe you have markers, or just a pen is fine, and a piece of paper. If you don't have those things handy, you don't have to step away, but maybe you can think about what you would draw. And I want us to put our abstract artist hat on. So please think abstractly, like think about lines, shapes, you know, something abstract about how you feel about the COVID crisis. And if you don't want to do it physically, which is fine, think about what you would do sort of in your imagination. And I'm going to take a second to do it myself, just to show you. Just let your imagination go. I'm just reading people's body language to see who looks like they. Great. So I'm going to show what I have, just to kind of break the ice, because I know this is awkward. I'm a play therapist by training, so I do a lot of this kind of stuff. But if you go to my screen, I don't know if I'll try to bring it up close so you can see it, the MFR support screen. I did 2 parallel squigglies and 2 vertical squigglies. And what that brought up in me is, you know, trying to move forward, but it's bumpy and rocky. Well, you know, the COVID goes up and kind of interferes with things. So it's squiggly and bumpy and uncertain. You know, I don't have the same certainty I normally do. But you know, trying to move forward anyway. I know some people may not be used to this kind of interaction. Does anybody else want to share, either verbally or in the chat box, what came up for them?
I'm happy to share, Lisa.
Thank you.
I don't know. Can you see me? Can you see my screen?
You might have to, what I can do is I can stop screen sharing. That'll help. All right. Sorry. Now we're ready, Carrie Ann.
And then you can also pin, the participants can pin your picture, and that will blow up your picture so that in speaker view yeah, or pin someone's picture.
So as I'm homeschooling, my son had to do a report on bullying, and he ended up drawing a picture of a stop sign with bullying in it. So when you first said that, I drew a stop sign with the stop COVID, because it's just taking on a life of its own, and it's just rolling and rolling. So the momentum is impactful, and so I'm just saying, stop. Let's put a stop sign out there.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you for that. And COVID is kind of a bully if you think about it.
Right? Yeah, good point.
I'd be willing to go next.
Yeah, please.
So I don't know if everyone can see that.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's very clear.
Okay, so the circle, and it's a circle and a lightning bolt. And the circle for me, the process, this COVID seems to just be a continuum, something that's never ending. And the lightning bolt represents for me how it suddenly struck us.
Great.
That's very vivid. Thank you so much for that. Wow. Wow, you're right. There is a sense of never ending. We don't know when it's going to end. And it was very sudden as well. Like, 4 months ago, I never would have dreamed that we'd be living like this. That's very rich. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So, can y'all hear me?
We got you.
Okay.
Yes.
So mine is, I'm a very amateur drawer, but mine is trying to fit a circle into a square peg. And this COVID virus has really caused us to try to fit that square circle, or try to fit that circle into a peg. And it reminds me of the movie Apollo, where they had to create that ventilation system and try to fit that circle into a peg, but they figured it out. And it just, as we go along, we're figuring it out, and how to deal with the COVID and how to work within, what it is that we're experiencing now.
Wow, that's really amazing that you said that, because there is a lot of frustrating moments with this. Like, we have to deal with a lot of technical problems we didn't know how to deal with. We have to deal with a lot of life problems that we didn't have to deal with. We're trying to make it work and keep it going, but there's all kinds of adaptations every day. That's wonderful. Yeah, thank you for communicating that. Anyone else want to communicate? I do see a couple of chats, so I'm going to go into those, but did anyone else want to share verbally?
Lisa, could you repeat the prompt again so folks can refresh?
Oh, repeat the prompt. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you were saying that we were supposed to draw something.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got you. I just wanted to make sure. Draw something abstract, or just something small about how you feel about COVID right now. So we got some really great feedback, but thank you for that nudge. So it can be kind of what you want it to be, either something concrete or abstract lines. Let me see what's in the chat box. We have Jenna had a face mask with the words virus across the mask in big red letters. Thank you for that, Jenna. It's funny about a face mask, because it does silence us in some ways. We can't communicate the way that we used to, and the virus is kind of making us wear these masks and putting barriers to our communication. Darlene has the figure 8. I could see, Darlene, if you want to elaborate on that, but I could see how it's sort of never ending, almost like an infinity sign. It just goes around and around. Gina said, figuring seems to be a common narrative among the COVID outbreak. Upon hearing 2 people mention that. So putting, figures to express how we're feeling about it. Thank you for that observation, Gina. That's great. If you want to be a play therapist, message me. And Christina put in the mental health support available. So there's a 211 if you're in a local area code. And there's also a youth crisis hotline, 1-800-422-0009. And there's also a suicide and crisis hotline, 301-864-7130. And Gina elaborated, never ending, and barriers both definitely involve figuring. That's perfect. Thank you, Gina. I just want to do a quick check. Was there anyone else who didn't share that wanted to? Great. I think we covered everyone. If I missed anyone, feel free to, oh, there's another chat. Oh, thank you, Gina. She said, you're welcome for the feedback that she gave. Thank you, Miss Gina. I'm just opening up the slide again, sorry. Oh, BL wrote, I visualized large teardrops. Those of us, tears of those who have lost lives, so people who have lost their lives, the tears we have from the fear and anxiety of being exposed or actually catching the virus. I also see the tears as the bubbles we are now forced to live in, which may cause tears at the end of each day from the stress and feelings of being overwhelmed. That's beautiful. Thank you, BL. That's very evocative, the tear and bubble double image. And there is so much sadness right now. Some of our consumers are passing away or getting very sick. Some of our loved ones. It's a very sad time. So thank you for bringing that into the room. I wanted to thank you all because that was a very rich discussion, and I put you on the spot with it. So I really want to applaud you. I wanted to see if I could turn over to Rebecca to lead the next slides. I've been talking a long time. I don't want everyone to get sick of my voice.
Unmute yourself, Rebecca.
Sorry, I put her on the spot.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So this slide is about, so why do you work in this field? And it'd be interesting, I'm going to pose this out again, dialogue and discussion, but so be thinking about what made you get into this field. And most of us have a story, or there was an event, or there was an experience that created our desire to be in this helping field. So Carrie Ann, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you could start and just share what made you get into this field and to do the work that you do.
Sure. So you're reminding me of the application I had to write for grad school.
Oh.
Because I applied to public health. So yep, I'm in that human services, public health arena. I got into this work because of my interest in just service. My family growing up was big on service, community service, family service. And so it was important for me to find a space and career that could facilitate kind of that inherent ability and willingness to serve. I find that service is one of the most critical disciplines in life. For me, it was important to do that. So I'm in this field because of my interest and desire to serve, and because I love learning. I'm a perpetual or a lifetime learner, and to learn for me is engagement and interaction with people. So I enjoy working with people. I enjoy doing it through service. So that's my biggest thing.
Yeah. Ava, could you share? Oh, maybe Ava's not there. Is there anyone else who would like to share?
As far as what got you into this field?
Yeah, what got you into this field? Well, while everyone's kind of revisiting all those years in the past, Lisa can go ahead and fill in that slide. That would be great. So many of us, for certain, got into this field to inspire, to touch lives, to strengthen others, and even to provide humor to those first responders who need that type of connection so very much. We also got into it as a first responder to honor, to bear witness, and to serve, whether it's to serve our country or exactly as Carrie Ann said, to serve others and to serve human beings, to serve our family members, and to serve those lives that we can touch. We know that it can be extremely satisfying to help others and to make an impact in lives, to help change lives, to help enhance lives and create movement for people. Also, we got into this field could be to provide a sense of gratitude and a sense of perspective. So gratitude in the sense of saying thank you to so many others who have helped to enhance our world, but also to help give a perspective to people so that they are able to create that change and movement in their life to make themselves a better whole at the end of the day, and to fill in some of those traumatizing experiences that have happened to them so that we can begin to help people move forward and move on. And also it is gratifying to be needed. So as someone in the therapeutic community, we are gratified to be needed. And then I see someone has put in honor and help, and all of those things are absolutely accurate. We do want to honor, we do want to help others, and we do want to be there to be the guiding light, to cheer people on, to be a cheerleader for some people who don't have those personal cheerleaders in their life, but that are so needed. And on the next slide, we begin to talk about personal qualities of first responders. Personal qualities of first responders. There's lots of common things that we have in common as a first responder and as humans, for certain. They may be good at navigating complex situations, could be very good at being perceptive and taking charge, have lots of personal resiliency, good caretaking skills, having a sense of order, respect, compassion, humor, faith, perspective, gratitude, humility, patience. Oftentimes, we know this, we're a good listener. The majority of responding to any event, even as a counselor, is really listening and creating that relationship and creating that compassion. Being a good problem solver, being able to calm people down, being calm yourself, having a state of calmness, being a stabilizing force. May have to be more prone to have insight and sensitivity. Compassion, I just saw that come up. Thank you, Gina. Being tough, a high tolerance for stress. Please chime in on the chat as well if there's something that we need to say that isn't being said or that you feel like reiterating because of its importance. Taking notes, good. Having the courage, possessing a self-courage there. Having self-confidence, being determined, being a determined-minded person. They believe in their ability to exercise control over situations, being action-oriented, being a risk-taker, being highly dedicated. They're helpers and caregivers by nature, having that within. It's just innate. Many of us have that innate ability, and that's what drives us to strive for the good that we do. High need for stimulation oftentimes. They can be easily bored, having that high need for stimulation and that kind of a go, go, go impact. They come from first responder families. So oftentimes, as we know this, people generally oftentimes will follow a path, maybe something that their parents did or a sibling did that they've come to look at as something positive, and they too want to be a first responder as well. Is there anyone else who can chime in with some of the personal qualities that they might have as a first responder?
Gina had added in honor, help, and gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was great. Okay, great. We'll move on to the next slide where we're talking about the personal challenges of first responders. And I'm sure that we can think about many of those challenges. They probably come right to our minds. But one thing is may have a trauma history in their early life that can lead to additional post-traumatic symptoms. So having that in their past, and we talked about that quote from that sergeant talking about your body feels it once, but it's a trauma that lives on every day, may put the needs of others ahead of their own, may have or take on a lot of personal responsibilities such as families, parents, friends, communities, may have resistance to asking for help. I'm okay, everyone else needs me, or feeling not worth the time, energy needed to get help. So kind of putting themselves first in order to help others. Everyone else needs me. First responders in COVID-19 have to be concerned with their own physical health, and they are also concerned with exposing their family and loved ones with the virus. So some of those healthcare workers on the front lines with their physical health are coming home, and before they even enter the door are probably stripping down. Maybe their family is leaving clothes out for them to change, stripping down, going right to the laundry, going right to the shower, right to the bath, having to take all of those sanitary precautions.
And Carrie,
someone said keeping up. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to highlight that for you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, great.
And I'd like to add something also, Rebecca, is that we always hear about, especially on the news, about, people changing their clothes in the garage or whatever before they come in and then they shower. But a lot of essential workers don't have garages, have those, areas where they can change. And so, the laundry is a laundry room, a public laundry room. And so it really, very difficult for our essential workers who are working and, delivering the mail, working in the grocery stores, working in the pharmacies, they're very fearful of bringing that home to their families. And they have the ability to protect themselves like other individuals who may be first responders or in essential, crucial, critical positions, but they have homes and garages, that sort of thing.
And Erica chimed in and said, very good point, Christina. And I think that is something that we all have to be mindful of. I saw or heard, I can't remember it, the other day, someone was saying, here we are, we're all in the same boat with COVID. And then I heard someone correct them and it made lots of sense. They said, we're actually not in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, but everyone has a different boat. And everyone's boat looks a little bit different. Someone might be in a little dinghy raft with a hole in it. And someone might be in their cabin cruiser that's 40 foot long that has 3 decks.
That's right.
So everyone is in the same storm, but in a different boat.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I think to your point, Christina, that's something that we have to be so mindful of, because sometimes, we can take for granted some of the luxuries or the comfortabilities that we do have. And, that's always something to be mindful of for certain. But I wanted to get back to where it was saying keeping updated via news sources and via communication with community, family, and friends. So the news and the media is wonderful, certainly, and it's a source of information for us without a doubt. But at the same time, we have to be cautious because that is, that's threaded a certain way and presented a certain way. So it's something that we always have to be cautious of, absolutely. And then the next slide that Lisa will share is about the special note about our former military, because a lot of many first responders or essential workers do have a military background. I don't know if anyone on the line or on our Zoom call today has a military background, but many of those essentials are vets of some sort. They could be in the National Guard, they could be reservists. So therefore, their experience as first responders pile onto a career that has had its share of critical instances and traumas. And quite frankly, even if an essential worker or first responder has not been in the military, when we think about our own lives and our own experiences, I'm sure almost each and every one of us, even before COVID, can think about a crisis or a trauma that we've all suffered. And it's a little bit different for everyone, but I'm sure we each have something that we can reflect back on that shapes who we are and what we bring to a certain situation. Also, these professionals embody bravery and resilience, but do not forget that at the end of the day, just like their fellow first responders, we are all, and they are all only human. We had a couple comments come in from Gina and DJ, so I'll just share those. Gina says, absolutely, I feel like this COVID outbreak has left many in question of what is comfortable and how to adjust to such a situation that hasn't been handled like past plagues in the recent past as of these past 20 years. Yeah, I think the last time we've had something of this magnitude was probably the Spanish flu, which was about 100 years ago. I mean, we've certainly had other things come up, but we certainly have not had a worldwide pandemic such as this. Another comment was saying essential workers are definitely more vulnerable to COVID, especially first responders, I'd assume. And then Darlene says I'm assuming this means that she is a Marine and she's now also a social worker. So certainly there are lots of past experiences. Darlene, would you be open to contributing to any more of that? No. Okay. So moving on to our next slide, where we talk about, go ahead.
If I may, this is Venus. I just wanted to add that, you were talking about the news, and that in itself adds a lot of stress. I'm a first responder. I'm a public works director. I oversee a small municipality, and I oversee public works and code. And so already challenging, trying to keep the council educated on where we are, what we need to do, making sure we're in compliance not only with state but county regulations, making sure that we're in step with county counterparts, keeping my staff safe. But as the news escalates, I have to manage my family, because every time Prince George's County spikes, I get a phone call. Are you safe? Are you properly prepared? Do you have enough supplies? And unfortunately, we can't go to the grocery store. We don't have special hours. We're at work. So trying to just make sure that we can have the necessary supplies to keep our family safe. I can't go see my dad because he would be in a high risk category. My mother just passed in January, so he's in the house by himself. My brother can't go check on him because he's a truck driver and he drives right through New York. That's his main route. So we have these isolations, and it creates other stresses, trying to manage the stress of everyone else, but we still have to go in every day and make sure that everybody else is okay. So there are additional stresses, and that's why I asked about those hotlines, because sometimes even when you call the special COVID number for the county, when we ask for resources for residents, because we have a lot of seniors that we want to refer services to, we don't always get that number. And that's why I was asking, so that the things that we can share with our colleagues as well.
Can I just chime in really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Venus, I'm so glad that you mentioned all of that, because two things came up. I too have a father who's in Florida, so I usually go every month and visit, and I can't do that. He's recovering from multiple strokes. And I find that this period of time has created a level of dissonance for us as individuals, like as you're describing, you know, the things that we have to do for our families, the things that we have to do for our colleagues, the things that we should be doing for ourselves. There's so many facets to it that it creates kind of this dissonance and distraction and frustration around it. And I'm so glad that you spoke to that, because I know we're all feeling some level of discomfort, but I don't know if we are doing, not necessarily we on this call, but just by and large, our communities are doing justice in terms of identifying the discomfort as dissonance and this displacement that we're definitely going through as individuals. So that's something that I'm so glad you raised, because I think we need to name things sometimes in this space, and based on how we operate as psychologists, you know, feel it, identify it, and then kind of process through it. And I think what you just did was all those three in a really quick way, and I really respect and appreciate you for doing that. The second thing that came up as you were mentioning care for seniors, they are one of the most concerning populations that we have in the county during this time, as well as our young people. The next session that we have will specifically be addressing young people and their frustrations and anxieties during this time. And so we've been working diligently with our Department of Family Services and our Department of Social Services, which fall under my umbrella, to really kind of ramp up our umbrella of care or our blanket of care, as I see it, for our seniors as well as for our young people, kind of those two ends of the spectrum, if you will. So please reach out to me. I can give you some contacts to get some resources going for this if anybody's interested. So just reach out to me and I'll drop my information in the chat box so you can connect with me around that. But thank you so much, Ms. Venus. I appreciate that.
Great. And Richard chimed in. One thing that we were talking about was the information in the media, and his comment was, yes, it does. The misinformation and different agendas are telling. And as far as are telling, I'm not quite, Richard, can you elaborate on that at all?
Telling in that it appears that the focus is not on, that there are clearly decisions that are being made that are not based upon, that are not as people oriented. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are large decisions are being made on larger scales. We're talking about capitalism comes into play, getting the other priorities that seem to differ from what it is that we do day to day. We're dealing with people day to day, and we're about the business of ensuring that people. And sometimes it doesn't seem to be, it doesn't come across as, it comes across as inhumane, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely. And something that, you know, we all have to be aware of. Carrie Ann, thank you for sharing your contact information. And I believe Lisa did an exclamation point with your word dissonance. I think that hit home. And then Venus followed up by saying human capital is not the priority for everyone. Yeah. So I think definitely there's some cohesion in the beliefs that you're expressing, Richard. Did anyone else want to share before we move on? Okay. So looking at the slide that we have on the screen, talking about first responder organizations and how they can help their staff. So as an organization, really taking a team approach, protecting one another, the I've got your back mentality, the support, being there for one another, encouraging shared responses, encouraging togetherness, humor, and even a little bit of gallows humor, kind of that ironic, satirical humor can be helpful depending on different personalities for sure. So knowing the culture and knowing the personalities, professionalism, accountability, maintaining a calmness under pressure. And then also in those organizations, having colleagues who are going through the same things. We're experiencing it differently, but we can be there for one another without a doubt. First responder agencies are often bureaucracies of an extent, but they do focus on consistency, fairness, and predictability, because those are qualities that are needed, that consistency, the fairness, and predictability. And then if we go into the next slide and we look at some of the organizational challenges for first responder agencies, sometimes those bureaucracies tend to move slow. Upper management may have different values and priorities than the front line. And I think that even when you talk about media, that's something that's being influenced right there. Slow to change and limited influence, may not be sensitive to the reality of emotional symptoms. Counseling and EAP can be seen as a disciplinary measure. So ensuring that counseling and EAP are being seen as a positive measure and in a positive way for people to access resources. Sometimes unrealistic expectations from the community, all the responsibility, none of the power. Sometimes organizations can have problematic coworkers. So being able to identify those problems and being able to mitigate through them and solve those challenges. Culture of strength, seeking help can be a sign of weakness, and there can be judgment and stigma, but knowing that seeking help can be a very positive thing, and having that mentality in all these different agencies and organizational structures is essential now more than ever, and particularly as we continue to move on and create whatever the quote unquote new normal is going to be, and whatever changes that we're going to be adjusting to, because for all of us, there will be some adjustment. Now, the degree that's going to have on our life and how that's going to impact us, we're not quite sure, because again, every boat is a little bit different. So we'll have to navigate and figure out what each of our boats need and how we're going to achieve that. On our next slide, talking about working with colleagues and professionals and different protective factors. So it can be possible to have a work spouse, so to speak, or really a work family that you have a relationship with and a comfortability with. Checking in, getting a perspective, humor, support, having the intention that we're all in this together. Two heads are better than one, can show us other ways of being in the world, and can help us vent, decompress, and have a positive energy. Lisa, did you have anything else you wanted to share regarding those group of slides?
No, thank you so much, Rebecca. I just wanted to see if anybody else, either verbally or in the chat box, wanted to talk about how colleagues help them right now, help them through. I know one thing at Maryland Family is that we do because we're not in the office, Maryland Family has a really tight community, and because we're not in the office, we can't just stop by and say hi to each other. So we do a daily office hour where you can call in and just vent or talk about, how you hate telehealth or whatever you need to do. So we do offer those alternatives, and so we can keep that sense of community. And I was wondering if anybody else wanted to share how their colleagues help or how their agencies are helping them right now. I think it's good to talk about the negative things, but I think it's also helpful to think about some of the positive things that are happening. I'll give people a second in the chat box.
While people are going to type in, I can share really quickly. So I work very closely with one of my colleagues who I think is on the call, Marlon. And I describe her as my partner in crime, as she humanizes things for me. She kind of keeps me calm throughout our busy days, as things are very chaotic for us, as you can imagine, being in the health and human services side of things. And she, we have some moments where we're like, I can't believe this is going on right now. They're not describing the situation accurately, or, I'm really hungry. I need to stretch out on the floor. My back is hurting. So there are just moments that she keeps very human for me, and keeps me grounded. So I enjoy that, and the banter that we have back and forth daily.
Oh, thank you, Carrie Ann. You do the same for me.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's wonderful. Sometimes having like a best friend at work or someone you can just be real and authentic with, and that can, keep, your sense of humor going and things like that. I had one coworker, this was back before I went into social work, I was a paralegal, and, paralegaling where I was at was really stressful. And there was one day where I was kind of snappy. I was 22. I had limited coping skills, but I was a little snappy. And my friend, Eileen, that I worked with, kind of checked me on it. She did it in a really nice way, but she said, you can't, talk to me like that. And it was really like a good, like, learning lesson for me, and I didn't do it again. And to her or anyone else. And so sometimes we need people who can be honest with us and kind of check us, as well as giving us the humor and the support and the love. And so that was really helpful for me. And do other people have ways that coworkers or organizations are helping them right now?
Okay. I can move on. Oh, here we go.
Oh, good.
It says, I've had a handful of coworkers that I consider friends. We call, text, and FaceTime to check on each other. And just recently, I had to reach out to one to let her know that I noticed wasn't here like normal. Had to let her know that I had her back and to take some time out for herself. That's so wonderful to be able to share in that support, because we end up spending so much time as a professional. We spend so much time at work and with with people, and so really creating that family and community is so important. So that's wonderful that you were able to do that for your colleague, Akia.
I just wanted to jump on that as well. A lot of agencies are kind of, and not agencies, but even individuals are making their own support systems right now. There's a lot more group meetings and supervisions and things like that, and a lot more like colleagues reaching out to each other and just kind of supporting each other in that kind of informal way. I think that's really wonderful.
Yes, this is Venus again. I would definitely echo your sentiments. As I said, I'm the public works director, but I work out of the police department. We share the same building. And so my chief of police is like my big brother, and I am his spoiled little sister. So we kind of balance each other off. I often say that I humanize him. I'm his conscience, because he, being former Marine, well, they never say former, being a retired Marine, and being a police officer, their mindset is one way. He's, looking at law and enforcement. And so I often have to tell him that I'm his conscience, to look at a different perspective. And then he's my reason, my reasoning when, we're interfacing with the laws or engaging with the council, that, we have to look at things from a different perspective. So I think that we definitely, and even during this crisis, there are times when I can't get things because, Public Works isn't always remembered as first responders, but they'll always remember the police department. So there are times when we'll have to share resources. And that's honestly the only way we've really gotten through this is, him using his police contacts and me using my community networking contacts are sometimes the only way we've been able to get PPE or get cleaning supplies to keep our operations moving.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you for that. And I think you raise a really good point, which is that we need people who are like us, but we also need people who are different than us, to show us different perspectives and different ways of addressing this crisis. So I really appreciate that, because there's strengths and weaknesses to both, right? We do need law and order, so we don't have chaos, but we also need the empathy and the compassion and the sensitivity. And then Erica, I like Erica. She has 3 coworkers that are dear, and they check in daily, and then they have a Zoom happy hour monthly. I think that's wonderful. Having coworkers that not only discuss business, but also just socialize and recreate. I think that's just lovely. So thank you for that contribution, Erica.
And to continue with the slides, and then talk a little bit about responder agencies and how they can help. talking about creating a positive and supportive organizational structure. And we know that this is essential in general, but this is essential particularly for first responders to maintain resiliency, wellness, and mental health. Resiliency is such a big factor when we talk about all of these things with with all of us humans, quite frankly. Mental health is often an overlooked component of first responder safety and wellness. So hopefully this will become on the forefront in terms of the safety and wellness for not only first responders, but for all of us as humans, because our physical health and our mental health is so essential to all the work that we do. Change the organization's culture mindset to one of we take care of our own, from the we take care of our own to we take care of all of us here. We ask for help, we stay healthy, we look out for each other and for the rest of our community. Agency chiefs or leaders have a responsibility to set the tone and the stage. And I think Venus spoke up and was discussing just that. The question here is posed, does your agency do anything to support its staff? Is there anyone who would like to either chat in using the chat box or to verbally share something that their agency is doing to support its staff? Okay, maybe it'll come as we move on. The next slide is on getting additional support. On getting additional support is not a sign of weakness, but it is a strength. And that is one of the things that we as mental health professionals are trying to share and spread throughout. It is not a sign of weakness, but it is a sign of strength, of your own well-being and your own betterness. Treating an emotional injury is no different than treating a physical injury. There's a process that has to be gone through. Treating a physical injury might be a little bit quicker because you can lay on that operating table and they'll take out whatever they need to and sew you back up, and in 3 days you're off and running again. But an emotional injury is treated similarly in the sense that we've got to open it up. We've got to take that pain. It's not going to be stitched up in a matter of 3 days, but it is an injury that needs to be treated. Professional help may be needed if your feelings and behaviors are affecting your job, your relationships, your ability to manage your life, your overall quality of life. And if you are having thoughts of self-harming or thoughts of harming someone else, those are essential to get that professional help. The next slide talks about seeking mental health services. And again, as Lisa mentioned, we'll have some resources for you at the end of the slides. Asking for help takes courage. It is important to find licensed clinicians who are experienced in working with first responders, who understand the culture and are trained, who are certified in evidence-based treatment modalities such as EMDR, CBT, brain stopping, that work well with kinds of trauma and experience that first responders experience. Getting that help, and then also getting the help from the right professional. Personal and structural barriers to getting help. Obviously, we know about the shame and stigma. Sometimes it's not convenient to access service. So one of the things that has really exploded recently is obviously the telehealth. And for many, that makes accessing services easier, but that's also a barrier for some who don't have the technology that we need to be able to do that, who maybe only have one small smartphone, who don't have a computer, who aren't able to access the telehealth properly. So we go back and we think about what are barriers for some and what are barriers for others. Certainly another barrier could be a demanding workplace, a demanding work schedule, and demanding workplace policies. And certainly, I'm sure we could all chime in and list other barriers that we think of, but hopefully that encompasses some of the fews. And then Lisa's going to pick up on the next slide and talk about some of the cultural barriers that first responders receive.
Yes, thank you so much, Rebecca. So in a lot of our professions, there's strength, bravery, detachment, professionalism, resilience, excuse me, are, I'm so sorry, are revered. Mental health issues, including suicidal ideation, are something few want to acknowledge, let alone address. So, I work in mental health, and even in mental health, like, we are expected to, and rightfully so, we're expected to be able to handle any personal issue we have and still be, emotionally at the ready for anything that a consumer might need. But the other side of that is that, we can fall into a way of thinking like we don't need help, and sometimes we do. Suicidal thoughts or mental health problems can be seen as dirty little secrets. A lot of people on the front lines may be afraid or embarrassed to share their struggles with mental health. There may be fear of negative career advancement or career destruction. In a climate where nobody really talks about mental health, first responders can feel really isolated, like, I'm the only one that's feeling this way right now. And that can kind of, spiral into not seeking help because it's just me, I can handle it, I got to think it through, no one else is having this problem. A lot of times at some first responder agencies, there's not much conversation about mental health, and so that can lead to a lack of acceptance, which can also be a barrier. What we're going through isn't normal, and there are symptoms that you're going to have, and if we just treat it like, that's not the case, we use a lot of avoidance. Avoidance works in the short run because it keeps us from being overwhelmed, but in the long run, it can definitely backfire and trigger, much worse mental health symptoms. In terms of resilience, any comments about that before I go on? I'll keep an eye on the chat box. But in terms of resilience, resilience refers to the ability of an individual to bounce back during and after adversity. Our resilience is our capacity to work through and overcome challenges. There's also another term that's come out the past couple of years called post-traumatic growth, which is like when we have traumas, it's not okay to have traumas, but one of the silver linings is that we can develop in new ways, and we can have some strengths that we didn't know we had, or we can develop some new coping. Resilience begins with 7 basic things. Hydration and nutrition. Hydration is a really big one. A lot of us are spending more time in temperature-controlled settings. A lot of us are, working long hours where we don't have as many breaks to get a glass of water and things like that. So it's important to find ways to keep up with our hydration. Sleep is another one. In times of stress, we can lose sleep or we can oversleep. So keeping an eye on our sleep cycle and having a good sleep hygiene routine to get ready for bed, going to bed at a normal hour if you can, when it's available. Exercise, a lot of people mentioned exercise, working out, playing basketball. Moral strength, someone had mentioned earlier, having a faith system and having your own morals and values, whether it's through a religion or through a personal code or a family code or a work code, but having those that sense of morality, like what will I do, what won't I do, and what do I do when I feel like I'm being compromised. DM mentioned they have a favorite cup they drink out of, and they try to drink 64 ounces a day. That is wonderful. I think 64 ounces is usually what's recommended, and it's good to make it a priority right now, even if like other times you might try to skirt by, and whatever you can do to make it fun, having a favorite cup, I think is fabulous. So thank you for sharing that. Having a sense of altruism. So thinking about the other person. Of course, with first responders, we can go a little extreme with that, but thinking about the other person, and also thinking about the people we are helping, not just some people we can't help for various reasons, but we have to also think of the people we are helping right now, and the successes we do see. Cultivating an overall sense of happiness, not being, Pollyanna, but just looking at things that we're grateful for, looking at things that do bring us joy. And Gina made a note about altruism or thinking about the other person. Yes, that's very good. Thank you for highlighting that, Gina. And a sense of faith. It doesn't have to be a religious faith, although a lot of people do find religion as a sense of, huge support. But just having some sort of a big picture, like, this is bad right now, but it will it will at some point subside. This is teaching me new things. This is deepening my awareness. This is, leading me to meditate, like having some system of meaning to make sense of all this. It doesn't make sense, but having a larger picture can sometimes help us with resilience. The other thing that was one of Rebecca's colleagues, Jenny, shared this, and it was really helpful to me. Resilience is a process. It's something that requires daily commitment. And some days our resilience is going to be better than others, and that's okay. Resiliency and smart responses go together. It can be the difference between success and failure, or the difference between recovery and despair. And one thing I like that Dr. Williams had said is being resilient doesn't mean that you don't develop mental health concerns such as stress or post-traumatic injury. So sometimes we can, kind of beat up on ourselves like I'm not resilient anymore. Resilience is not that nothing bad is going to happen or you won't feel a certain way, but it's how do you bounce back, and what do you do to bounce back? If you do cultivate those resilient habits, you're better able to bounce back when these injuries do happen. And we do feel sad, frustrated, angry, burned out when there is a setback, but we start to look at finding ways to start to heal and recover as best we can and move forward. Some factors that contribute to resiliency are a positive attitude. Gina made a note, resiliency is how to bounce back. Was that a question or just a reinforcement? Reinforcement. Thank you. I didn't know if you wanted me to open it up to the group. We can talk in a few minutes about how we find ways to bounce back. So I'll open that up. Thank you, Gina, for that. Some factors that contribute to resiliency are trying to have a positive attitude. Again, it's hard to be totally positive in this environment, but doing the best we can to cultivate a sense of hope, looking at what's working as well as what's not working. Having flexible thinking. So a lot of us, when we're stressed, we get into black and white thinking, this is horrible, it's never going to end, nothing I do matters, and thinking a little bit more flexibly, like this is horrible, but there are some things that are working right now. Having a personal moral compass, so thinking about our own values and moral system as it is. Having a resilient role model. So who do we look up to that's handling this well? Facing our fears, so in a safe environment, whether with a loved one or a friend or a professional, what are we afraid of? There's a lot of fear right now, and we can't keep it bottled up inside. Who do we share those fears with? Having active coping mechanisms that we talked about earlier, exercise, nutritious eating, getting outside with a mask on, doing those positive things for ourselves, bubble baths someone mentioned, what do we do to nurture our spirit and our soul and our body right now? Having a supportive social network. One thing that has been sort of a silver lining of COVID is that we're not bound by space anymore. So I've been doing some Zoom calls with people in New Mexico, whereas normally I wouldn't kind of take that opportunity. But in some ways, it's changing the way that we communicate and who we communicate with. Physical fitness is a huge one, and recognizing and using our own strengths. Is there anyone else that would like to contribute to what helps them with their resiliency or what helps them to bounce back?
I think being around positive people also helps.
Yes, thank you, Christina.
Yeah, as opposed to people who are doom and gloom and negative and,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. Limiting your exposure to people who do bring you down in different ways and focusing with people who, are able to uplift you and inspire you. I think that's wonderful. Thank you for that. Anyone else? That's great. DM mentioned reminding themselves of difficult times they've overcome in the past. This is the first time that most of us have seen this kind of crisis, but we've all been in crises before. We're frontline workers, crisis is what we do, right? And this is just thinking about how we've overcome things in the past and how someday this is going to be a memory too. And DM added, this too shall pass. I think that's a great thing to always remember. I saw another message in there too. Oh, Dolly mentioned comedy. Yes, using humor as a way to cope, I think, is a wonderful coping mechanism. Watching comedy shows, talking to friends that are funny. I have a bad addiction to puns, so I sometimes have to resort to that. Catherine mentions reminding herself of the end goal and that it's worth the stress, no matter how stressful it is, to get to that end goal. I love that, being goal driven. And what am I trying to accomplish with my job and my mission and with my life? What am I trying to make of my life? And how do I get there, and how it's worth it in the end? And Rebecca mentioned positive self-talk too. We have to have friends that are positive with us, but we also have to look at how we talk to ourselves. Are we saying nice things to ourselves? Are we saying helpful things to ourselves? Thank you so much for that, Rebecca. I wanted to point out some resources. We're very grateful that Prince George's County provided us with 3 crisis resources, which are in the chat box. We also were able to locate some other resources. There's a national crisis hotline. There's a firefighter, that's hard to say, firefighter veteran website for firefighters, Badge of Life. There's a COP line, which is a crisis support for police officers. There's also Service and Protect, Safe Call Now. And Arundel Counseling does have a law enforcement officer hour. I don't know if Rebecca would like to speak a little to that. And Maryland Family Resource is also providing a assessment and 3 sessions for first responders at no charge. Our staff are volunteering to do that. Rebecca, did you want to talk a little about the Anne Arundel Counseling Enforcement Hour?
Sure, absolutely. So what we do, and Anne Arundel Counseling has our office in Prince George's County in Bowie, Maryland, and we offer these services there as well. So Dr. Williams, who Lisa had spoke of, is a first responder specialist on staff, and she and a couple other of our folks offer what we call a Leo hour, and it is a free hour for law enforcement officers where they may come in and meet with a clinical specialist free of charge. There is no copay. It's not EAP related. It's an entity all on its own, and may talk with a clinician for the clinical hour for 50 to 60 minutes. And at the end of the hour, the clinician might make any recommendations for additional support if needed, and provide them with additional resources if needed, whether that be enrolling into clinical counseling, or whether that's just something independent that they can do by calling a hotline or a support system, that type of thing. So we do offer that. That is called our Leo hour, and that is open right now also to other first responders than just law enforcement during this pandemic crisis. To find out more information about the Leo hour, you can go directly to that link that Lisa has there. And it gives the protocol for how to enroll into the program and how to schedule that initial appointment.
Great, thank you for that.
Thank you,
Rebecca.
Christina.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that very important
And actually, Christina, even if you want to get a little further, it's actually a Leo hour on our LEOS program, which is Law Enforcement Officers Support Services. So we've even got Leo and LEOS in the mix.
That's awesome. Are the people who do it Leos? That was a joke. That was a joke.
Oh, okay. Okay. But ironically, I'm a Leo. I'm a Leo, Lisa. I'm born in August, so there you go.
There you go. That's awesome. Sorry, I have a weird sense of humor. It seems to be genetic. I can't fix it. And so in closing, to keep the lamp on burning, you must remember to put oil in it. So just reminding us all to keep our own lamps burning, and so we can be a resource to others, but also for ourselves, putting ourselves first at times, and remembering if our compassion does not include ourselves, it is incomplete. So taking all those great caregiving skills and putting them for ourselves. Are there any questions or comments?
We did leave a few minutes if anyone has any questions that they would like to open up to the group.
We'll keep We'll keep an eye on the chat box, but we did want to give you our information. Rebecca Mitch McKee oh, Andrea, thank you for that. She said very helpful. Rebecca is the Executive Director of Arundel Counseling, and her contact information is on the slide. I did want to also acknowledge Jenny Williams. She is very heavily involved with the police and military right now, so she wasn't able to come to the training, but she was a great contributor to the slide. She contributed a great deal of the content, so we wanted to give credit to her. She also works with Anne Arundel Counseling, and I'm Lisa Larrabee. I oversee the specialized interventions at Maryland Family Resource.
Lisa, there was a question if we will be emailing this presentation. I'm sure that's possible. If the ladies could let us know, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yes, if I could defer that to Christina or Carrie Ann. I know that the workshop is being recorded. Is there a place that's going to be posted later where people can access it, or should we take a list of emails?
So we can do both. I'm trying to figure out about space on the county website to post all of the recordings for the series. So there's that. But in the meantime, I would suggest email us, mentalhealth@co.pg.md.us, and I can email these slides to folks. I'm putting the address again in the box.
Great. I think Miss Carrie Ann is asking that if people could email her, that way we don't have to, because we don't have a way to, write down everyone's email right now. That would be a little bit easier to streamline it.
Yeah, it's best if folks just email me, and then I can release the slide deck.
And Karen mentions that Leos are cool too. We do love our Leos, both our law enforcement officers and our August birthdays and July birthdays. If there's no other questions or concerns, I think we can wrap up. I wanted to thank you once again for your tremendous support of this endeavor. I wanted to thank the county again for all of the effort they put into making this project available. I wanted to thank Rebecca and the staff of Anne Arundel County who have been supporting first responders for years. And thank you all for being open and brave and making great contributions.
Well, it was an excellent presentation. It
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent.
Really, really went well. I was really excited for this, and I'm grateful that folks stayed on with us and participated so rigorously. Thank you, everybody. Please email the mental health email address to request slides for this presentation. All right, so I'm going to stop recording now.